In 1898, the police came to my laboratory on Houston Street in New York City because the buildings in my neighborhood were shaking. Plaster cracked and rained from ceilings, and windows rattled so violently that people feared they would shatter. Residents flooded into the streets of Lower Manhattan, convinced that an earthquake had struck. When the officers burst through my door, they found me standing over a small device mounted to an iron column, a mechanical oscillator no larger than a man's fist, weighing only a few pounds. I had already seized a sledgehammer and smashed it to pieces because that was the fastest way to stop what was happening. That device weighed almost nothing, and yet the building it nearly brought to the ground weighed thousands of tons. The principle that made this possible, the principle I have spent my entire life pursuing, testing, and attempting to deliver to humanity, is the most powerful and least understood force in all of nature, and its name is resonance. Most people hear that word and think of something gentle, like a bell ringing or a choir singing in a cathedral. They imagine pleasant vibrations and harmonious sounds, and they move on, never suspecting that they have brushed past the key that unlocks nearly everything. I do not speak in metaphor here. I speak as a man who has held this key in his hands and turned it, and watched doors open that the world did not yet know existed. Let me show you what I found behind them. Before I take you deeper into my experiments, I need you to understand something about the world you inhabit. You believe you live among solid, still objects, things like a table, a stone, a steel beam. You see them sitting motionless, and you accept the illusion, which is perhaps the greatest trick nature has ever performed. There is nothing still in this universe because every atom exists in perpetual motion, vibrating at its own characteristic rate. The chair beneath you trembles, and the ground beneath the chair trembles, and the earth itself trembles, and I have measured its pulse. Everything you see and touch is an oscillating system, and every oscillating system possesses a property that most people never think to ask about, which is its natural frequency. That is the rate at which it prefers to vibrate, the rhythm it returns to when disturbed and left alone. Remember that phrase, natural frequency, because it is the seed from which everything I am about to tell you grows. Here is the principle, and I will state it plainly before I demonstrate its power. When you apply force to any system, whether mechanical, electrical, or acoustic, and you apply that force at the system's natural frequency, something extraordinary occurs. The system absorbs that energy with almost perfect efficiency, and each input reinforces the last. The amplitude of vibration grows and grows, far beyond what the modest input would suggest, which means small causes produce enormous effects. That is resonance. Consider a man walking across a suspension bridge. His footsteps are light, almost negligible compared to the mass of the bridge. But if the rhythm of his stride happens to match the natural frequency of that span, each footfall arrives at the precise moment to reinforce the bridge's own oscillation. Step after step, the sway builds, and the bridge begins to move in ways its engineers never intended. In 1940, the world watched this principle destroy the Tacoma Narrows Bridge in Washington state when wind, mere wind that was steady and persistent, struck the bridge at its resonant frequency. The deck twisted and writhed like a living thing, and within hours the structure tore itself apart and plunged into the waters below. No hurricane caused that collapse, and no explosive, just a steady breeze that happened to match the bridge's natural period of oscillation. Engineers had known this principle for decades, and I had demonstrated it in my laboratory 42 years earlier with a device I could hold in one hand. That evening on Houston Street, what I had done was precisely this. My mechanical oscillator, driven by compressed air, produced vibrations of extraordinary regularity. I attached it to an iron column running through the center of my building and into the foundation, then set it in motion and went about other work. Within minutes, the vibrations had traveled through the column, into the foundation, through the ground, and into every neighboring structure. I had found the resonant frequency of my building and its surroundings, and at that frequency, each tiny pulse compounded upon the last. The energy accumulated the way water rises behind a dam, silently and relentlessly, until the effect became seismic. When reporters asked me later whether such a device could truly destroy a building, I told them it could do more than that, because given enough time and the correct frequency, it could split the earth in two. I was making a point about the principle, not issuing a threat, but the principle is exactly that powerful. Now let me take you from the mechanical into the electrical, because this is where resonance revealed its deepest secrets to me. Heinrich Hertz, the great German physicist, had proven in 1887 that electromagnetic waves exist, that electrical energy could radiate through space at the speed of light. That was a magnificent confirmation of Maxwell's theory, but Hertz demonstrated existence, while I intended to demonstrate utility. I intended to prove that electromagnetic waves could carry not just signals but usable power, and that resonance was the mechanism that would make it possible. When I developed the apparatus that the world has come to call my resonant transformer, the Tesla coil, I was applying the identical principle of the oscillator, but to electrical currents. In that device, I constructed a circuit in which the inductance and capacitance were precisely matched, so that the circuit's natural electrical frequency aligned perfectly with the frequency of the oscillations I drove into it. The result was voltage amplification of a magnitude that astonished every engineer who witnessed it, because from a modest input I produced discharges of millions of volts. Artificial lightning leaped across my laboratory in bolts of electrical fire exceeding 100 feet in length. At my experimental station in Colorado Springs in 1899, the thunder from these discharges reached the town of Cripple Creek, more than 10 miles away, and I transmitted enough energy through the earth to illuminate 200 incandescent lamps at a distance of 26 miles without a single wire connecting them to my apparatus. None of this came from the application of overwhelming power. All of it came from resonance. The circuit was tuned, and every oscillation reinforced the previous one. Energy accumulated in the system with almost no loss, building and building until the discharge became explosive, and I controlled it with precision by adjusting the frequency and directing the accumulation. Because resonance is not chaos, it is the most disciplined force in nature, and it rewards exactness. But here is the thing that most people miss entirely: the discovery that consumed the later decades of my thinking and my ambition. During my months at Colorado Springs, I detected something that I consider among the most important observations of my career, which was stationary electrical waves passing through the body of the Earth. Let me say that once more, because the implications are staggering. The Earth, this enormous sphere of rock and metal and ocean, conducts electrical oscillations, and those oscillations reflect from the far side and return, establishing standing waves in exactly the same way that sound waves establish standing waves inside a pipe or a bell. The planet itself rings at a characteristic electrical frequency, and I found it and measured it. Decades later, in 1952, the physicist Winfried Otto Schumann mathematically confirmed that the Earth and its ionosphere form a resonant cavity, oscillating at a fundamental frequency of approximately 8 cycles per second. The scientific world now calls this the Schumann resonance, and I had detected its signature more than 50 years before it was formally described. The Earth vibrates, it has a pulse, and that pulse can be matched. This discovery changed everything for me, because if the Earth resonates at a natural frequency, then a transmitter tuned to that frequency could pump energy into the planet the way my small oscillator pumped energy into that building on Houston Street. Each pulse would reinforce the last, and the energy would not dissipate but accumulate in the standing wave structure of the Earth itself. From any point on the planet's surface, a properly tuned receiver could draw upon that energy. What I envisioned was wireless transmission of power, not mere signals or telegraph messages, but usable industrial electricity delivered to any location on the globe without wires. I described this vision in my patent of 1,900 US. Patent 645,576. A system for the transmission of electrical energy through the natural medium, and I built the tower at Wardenclyffe on Long Island to make it real. That tower was not a radio antenna or a signaling device. It was a resonant transmitter designed to set the entire planet vibrating at its electrical frequency and deliver energy to the world. Think about what I am telling you, because the same principle that lets a man's footsteps set a bridge swaying, the same principle that nearly demolished a city block in Manhattan, the same principle that let me hurl artificial lightning across 100 feet of open air, that principle scaled to planetary dimensions could have given every human being on Earth access to electrical energy anywhere at any time, without fuel, without wires, without the burning of a single lump of coal. The mathematics supported it, and the physics supported it, and I had demonstrated every component of the system in my laboratory. What I lacked was not knowledge, but the continued faith of my financier, J.P. Morgan, who could not see beyond the commercial logic of metered, wired power. Wardenclyffe was dismantled and the tower came down, but the principle did not change, because nature does not revise its laws to suit the timidity of investors. Let me take you deeper still, because resonance is not merely a tool for engineers. It is a window into the fundamental architecture of matter and energy. Consider how the universe builds complexity. An atom is a system of resonances, with electrons occupying specific energy states that are each defined by a characteristic frequency. A molecule is a collection of atoms vibrating in coordinated patterns, their bonds oscillating at rates determined by their masses and the forces between them. When light strikes matter, it is absorbed only if the frequency of the light matches a natural frequency of the atoms within, and this is why glass is transparent to visible light but opaque to ultraviolet. The atoms in glass resonate at ultraviolet frequencies and absorb that energy, while visible light passes through unmatched and unimpeded. This is also why a radio receiver tuned to one station does not hear the others, because the entire mechanism depends on selectivity through resonance. The universe is built upon this principle the way a city is built upon its streets, because without it nothing connects, nothing flows, and nothing reaches its destination. And here is something that would have delighted me beyond measure had I lived to see it. In your era, physicians look inside the living human body using a device called a magnetic resonance imaging machine. Consider that name carefully, magnetic resonance. They place a patient within a powerful magnetic field and excite the hydrogen atoms in the body's tissues at their precise resonant frequency, and those atoms absorb the energy and then release it in patterns that reveal the hidden interior, including organs, blood vessels, and the very structure of the brain, all made visible through resonance. My principle applied not to copper wire or iron columns, but to living flesh. The same law that shattered my neighbor's windows on Houston Street now saves lives in every hospital on Earth, and that is the reach of this force. And here is the beautiful part that ties it all together. Resonance is not merely about destruction or amplification, but is nature's mechanism for transferring energy between systems with maximum efficiency. When two systems share the same natural frequency, energy flows between them with almost no loss, and this is the principle behind every electrical circuit I ever designed. This is also why I fought so fiercely for alternating current against the advocates of direct current, because alternating current oscillates, and oscillating systems can be tuned, and tuned systems can be brought into resonance, and resonant systems transfer energy with an efficiency that no brute force method will ever approach. Picture two tuning forks identical in construction. Strike one and it vibrates, producing a clear tone. Place the second fork nearby, untouched and silent, and within moments the second fork begins to vibrate, singing the same note. Energy has leaped across the space between them without contact, without wires, and without any visible mechanism, because they share a natural frequency and they are in resonance. I devoted my life to scaling this principle upward, from tuning forks to transformer coils, from coils to transmitting towers, and from towers to the planet. And that principle continues to prove itself long after my laboratory fell silent. In 2007, researchers at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology demonstrated what they called witricity, meaning wireless electricity, by lighting a 60-watt bulb from a power source 7 feet away with no physical connection. Their method was resonant magnetic coupling between two coils tuned to the same frequency, and they described it as a breakthrough, though I had described it in 1900. Today, you carry devices in your pocket that receive energy through the air from a charging pad, and every one of them operates on resonant inductive coupling. It is my principle miniaturized, commercialized, and placed into the hands of billions, and still it represents only the barest fraction of what resonance can do. This is what troubles me. What has always troubled me? Humanity discovers a principle of immense power and then uses only the smallest edge of it. We discovered fire and used it to cook meat when it could forge civilizations. We discovered electricity and used it to illuminate parlors when it could have reshaped the relationship between human beings and the physical world entirely. Resonance is such a principle. The world has used it to tune radios and build medical scanners and charge telephones, and these are worthy applications. But the principle itself, the ability to accumulate energy without apparent limit through rhythmic and precisely timed inputs, the ability to transfer power across vast distances without material connection, the ability to interact with the vibrational structure of matter at every scale, all of this remains almost entirely unexplored. The universe does not operate through static forces, but through dynamic oscillation. Every phenomenon you observe, whether it is light, heat, sound, magnetism, or the chemical bonds holding your body together, every one is a manifestation of vibration at some frequency. And wherever there is vibration, there is the possibility of resonance, and wherever there is resonance, there is the possibility of extraordinary amplification, extraordinary efficiency, and extraordinary control over the physical world. I spent many nights alone in my laboratory, surrounded by the hum of my machines and the blue glow of electrical discharge, and in those hours I arrived at a conviction I have never abandoned. If you wish to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, not as philosophy or poetry, but as the literal operating language of nature. Every object, every substance, and every living creature is simultaneously a transmitter and a receiver, broadcasting its own frequency and responding to the frequencies around it. The universe is not silent but vibrates at every scale, from the hydrogen atom in a physician's scanner to the electron